serving real estate investors, homeowners, and builders. 12 offices across California, Texas, Florida, and Tennessee. Best-in-class technology, education to empower you, brokerage, property management, private lending, and investment funds. Think real estate? Think Marshall Reddick. Creating financial independence since 1979.
Welcome, everybody. Again, welcome to tonight's presentation. We're going to be talking about what can a $100,000 investment get you with Marshall Reddick Real Estate. So we got this idea of this presentation from Marshall himself. I was looking through some old presentations that showed, what can, I believe it was like 25,000 get you, right? So obviously that was quite some time ago, and things are different now. So we've had to change that number a bit, but it's a good presentation because for those of you that are unfamiliar with Marshall Reddick, you can get an understanding as to the various options that you can leverage or use to deploy, a certain amount of capital that you guys have. So we'll go into that shortly. Just before I do jump into that, I'd like to do a quick introduction. My name is Vince Tomich. I'm an advisor and realtor here at Marshall Reddick. I have been with the company now for just over 7 years. I like to really, explain to people that I practice what I preach, right? I get involved in a lot of the services and offerings that we provide. So I'm a real estate investor myself. I've purchased properties with Marshall Reddick. I have used Marshall Reddick's property management. I have borrowed money with Marshall Reddick. I have lent money with Marshall Reddick. I'm active in the mortgage fund. So these are all things that I do in my personal life, as well as, of course, work here professionally. So it's really nice to be able to share the experience as a customer, but also have the knowledge and the know-how of an employee and how things are working here and how we do things at our firm. So that's a little bit more about me, and really happy to be able to connect with you folks and get an understanding of what it is you may be trying to achieve and trying to help you guys go that direction. So I like to also explain for those of you that are newer to Marshall Reddick, who we are and what we do, right? What does Marshall Reddick offer? So I like to break it down into these 4 categories. So Marshall Reddick, we offer real estate brokerage services. So we help people buy and sell homes, whether that's your primary residence, if you're here in Southern California, or maybe you're looking to purchase an investment property in one of our out-of-state markets, those being Texas, Tennessee, or Florida. We can help you with the buying and selling of any of those types of properties. 99% of the people that end up purchasing an investment property are going to need property management services, and we offer property management services from A to Z. So from marketing the property, from rent collection, from rent disbursement, any kind of maintenance or repair requests, we would be able to handle that on your behalf from our property management side of our business. We are also a private money lender. So I'm going to go into a little detail of that later in the presentation, but it's not like your traditional conventional lending that a lot of folks are familiar with. This is going to be more for your short-term types of borrowers. Those might be fix and flippers. Those could be short-term bridge loans for various reasons, or for those of you that have self-directed retirement accounts and want to buy properties in those accounts. We can offer non-recourse financing. So those are all really good examples of people that borrow capital from us. And then lastly, we have an investment fund. So our mortgage fund, which again, I'm going to go into more detail on. I think that is a really interesting part of our business, and it makes us definitely much more unique than your traditional brokerage as one of our offerings. So we'll touch on that as well. But these are, kind of all of the services and things that we can offer. My role as an advisor is to ultimately learn and understand what you are trying to achieve and implement the specific services or the partners that we work with to make that happen. So a lot of the times during your investment journey or, your initial contact with Marshall Reddick, you'd be talking to somebody like myself or somebody else in my role to help kind of assist and guide you through the various pathways that we can offer. Right now, you're going to see a map showing all of our offices, right? So you'll see across the country here again, California, Texas, Tennessee, Florida. These are all of the locations that we have a brick and mortar, office, property management services, uh, basically boots on the ground. So I'm located in our Newport Beach office here in Southern California. But again, I have very close contacts and communication with our whole team across the country. So for those of you that are considering or interested in learning about, where do we have a footprint, this is that map. And yeah, you can see that here. So what are we going to be going over today? Again, the topic of today's conversation is, what kind of investments can you get involved in with $100,000? So essentially what we're going to be talking about today is, investment property. That's a core element of our business. That's something that we're going to go into more detail, and that's about finding the right market. We're going to talk about specifics as to why we're promoting, whether it's a certain location or type of property. And then we're going to actually break down a few properties. I have a few property examples in the presentation tonight that we can look at, and you can kind of get a better understanding of what that performance looks like. We're going to be talking about a little bit about the other side of our business, which is private money lending. Not so much from the borrower side. I will touch on that a little bit more just so that you can understand if you are interested in being a lender in some capacity, at least you understand where that money is going to and who those borrowers are. So we'll touch a little bit on that. We'll touch on the direct lending, which is basically matching one specific borrower to one specific lender, right? So that's a one-on-one capacity. And then we'll also talk about the other way to get involved in private lending, which is the mortgage fund. We'll talk a little bit about that offering and the way that works as well. So all pretty exciting stuff. These are all things that I deal with or I speak to our investors about on a daily basis. So very, very comfortable and very excited to be going into those details. So first, we're going to talk about investment property. So, I think we can all agree that not every single market across the country is a good market to invest in. I've highlighted some key criteria here that we feel supports a good investment market. So first on the list is population growth. We want to make sure that we're focusing on a market or an area where the population is growing, right? We don't want a population declining, so it's important that we find those markets. Now, our second bullet point here, job growth. This is kind of synonymous with population growth. Typically, if there are jobs and there are markets that are attracting people for work, you are going to naturally get that population growth as well. So those two go hand in hand. Economic diversity is a big one as well. We don't want to target or focus on one specific market that ultimately has one employer or one industry. So we feel as though it's more beneficial and safer to make sure there's economic diversity and there's multiple jobs that people can go to, and then in the event of some kind of a slowdown in one particular industry, there's not a collapse of the whole market, right? So next point there, housing affordability. Those of you that are here with me in Southern California, you can attest we are in a more expensive market. It's harder to make the numbers from an investment property standpoint work here. So a lot of folks seek alternatives, those being out of state. And when they look out of state, not to keep picking on California, but they typically seek more landlord-friendly states, whereas here in California, it tends to be a little bit more tenant-friendly. So finding markets that are a bit more landlord-friendly give that safety and assurity to those investors seeking, various options in more affordable markets. And then ultimately, good infrastructure. There's plenty of markets that have, exploded with population growth and job growth, but, the pace of which that growth is happening doesn't keep up with the infrastructure and ultimately kind of breaks down the allure to those markets over time. So we want to make sure we're focusing on those markets that do have that infrastructure or that ability to adapt and change with the the growth or prosperity of these various markets. So those are some of the bullet points that we, or the concepts that we think about when we're identifying good investment markets. Another kind of high level strategy or concept that we like to focus on is property class, right? So you're going to notice on any one of our properties on our website, you're going to notice a property class indication on the photo there, and you'll see this in the kind of middle left here. It starts with luxury and it goes all the way to D class properties. 5% of the properties you're going to see on our website are going to be A class properties. We will occasionally have luxury and we will have B class properties. You'll rarely see a C class property, and you'll never really see a D class property on our website. And the purpose of having a property class is to do our best to forecast expectations. Those of you that are familiar with rental property, you understand that there are variables that are impossible to forecast perfectly, but we do a really good job of trying to set those expectations. And one of the ways we do that is by focusing on the property class. So for example, if you are focusing on a property class like an A class property, you'll see, A class properties typically have more appreciation, typically a higher purchase price, and an overall higher tenant quality. And as you go towards like C or D class properties, you're going to have a lower purchase price, which ultimately is going to yield you potentially more cash flow. You usually are going to have a lower tenant quality. And what I like to ask people when they're seeking investment property is, what's more important to you? Are you looking for something of high quality that's going to appreciate over time, that maybe not give you much, monthly cash flow, or something that could produce you higher monthly cash flow, but overall stay a bit more stagnant in terms of appreciation growth? And truthfully, the answer I get most of the time is both, right? I want both. And that's fine. I get that answer often. And, that kind of leads me to B, right? Like a B class property. And the way I remember this is A class properties are more for appreciation, C class properties are more for cash flow, and B is for both, right? So that's kind of an easy way that I like to think about it. And we do have many properties that can meet this criteria, right? And by focusing on this A, B, C, category, we do make assumptions to maintenance and vacancy, because as I mentioned earlier, those that are familiar with owning property, you understand that at some point in the lifespan of owning that property, you will have maintenance, you will have vacancy, and ultimately, as much as you might see those numbers vary in different pro formas or different examples that you use, this is a good way for us to kind of forecast and what our expectations are. So you can see A class properties, we estimate 8% maintenance, 8% vacancy. In B class, 10 and 10, C class, 13 and 13. So, just to kind of close the loop here, for those of you thinking, well, I want more cash flow, I'm going to go for C class properties. The part that a lot of folks may not completely factor in is there are more maintenance and vacancy factors to account for. Usually the property is older, there's more deferred maintenance, and maybe you're dealing with a tenant population that is less consistent. So overall, there's some variables there that could actually, impact that what's on the spreadsheet there. But anyways, that's a little bit of how we determine maintenance and vacancy, and you'll see that in all of our properties as we move forward. Before I go into the properties, I think I have 4 properties to show, 3 of which are new construction. The idea is new construction is probably the most advantageous path at this time for a few reasons. One, there's a builder warranty that pretty much covers everything that you're going to face from a maintenance standpoint. I shouldn't say everything, but most things that you're going to face. You don't have deferred maintenance, right? So you're not buying a 35-year-old property that's going to need a new roof and plumbing and water heaters, etc. So that's really nice that you're not going to have to sink a bunch of money in after you just, put a down payment in, or if you bought it cash. usually you have a high tenant demand, just like everybody, right? Tenants like newer, nicer, cleaner, bigger, right? So new construction typically fits that bill. Right now, there's plentiful supply. So you have your options to pick and choose your various floor plans, your various bedroom count, your various locations. And that kind of leads into my next bullet point, which is, builder financing incentives, or just builder incentives in general. Ultimately, right now, builders are the folks that are facing the most inventory. They have the biggest pain point as it pertains to holding costs. So they are in the position, the most they're in the most aggressive position to try to sell properties, and there's a lot of incentives that are being offered. And we have done a really good job of finding out what are the most impactful incentives to our buyers. Is it closing costs? Is it paying for? Is it price reduction? Is it changing interest rates? Whatever it is, and we found that the interest rate, focusing on the interest rate, has been the biggest impact for changing the overall numbers, right? Because as we know, over the last 4 to 5 years, the interest rates increased has been a big headwind for making the numbers work for a lot of investment properties. So if builders are able to apply incentives to bring that down, it does really help make those numbers work a lot better. So that's what we're seeing a lot of today. So I just wanted to highlight a few properties. Again, the theme of tonight's presentation is what can $100,000 yield you, or what can that do for you, right? So I'm exclusively focusing on properties in which the investment capital needed is going to be less than 100,000. So you'll see here, though, I'll spend a little more time on this first property, but then we'll kind of go through them a little quicker, just to for the essence of time. Now, again, just to clarify, right, even though this property, you'll see in the top right corner, this property is listed for $249,900, but of course, financing is a big part of a traditional investment purchase. So there's definitely plenty of room here to get into a property like this for under 100,000, right? So just to kind of cover, this is our a PDF version of what's offered on our website. What's offered on our website to review properties is a much more interactive type of pro forma. But this does a good job when we're in presentation mode to kind of cover the nuts and bolts of the investment, right? So you'll see here on the left side, A-class property. This is in our Houston market. This was built in 2025. It's never been lived in, so consider that new construction. But 3-bed, 2-bath, 1932 square feet. There's a description below, and then of course on the right is all of our numbers, right? So the list price, we have a down payment of 30%. That is not required. Typically, 25% down is more common. 20 is pretty much the minimum down payment. We do factor in closing costs here, which are an estimate, and then ultimately get to that investment capital needed, $82,467. So you'll see that's kind of the metric we use as we use that against our return on investment or our cash on cash return. But you'll see here, so this property would rent for $1,750. We have a mortgage of $1,105.68. We have taxes at $39.33, insurance at $150, and management fee at 9%. So in the HOA there of $25. So ultimately, you get to the monthly fixed expenses at $1,465, and with that $1,750, you'd have a monthly income of $284.67. So and in this case, right, on new constructions, we scale back that maintenance a little bit. Typically in our calculators, you'll see 8% maintenance, 8% vacancy. But ultimately, what you're going to see here is a little scaled back, only because it's brand new and there's builder warranties. So that's why we've kind of brought that back a little bit. But then you'll see that at the bottom of the screen here, you have a 15-year projected profit. and a 15-year annual return on investment. This is assuming you hold the property for 15 years. Our default is making the assumption that you don't increase rent, which is an ultra conservative approach, almost a bit too conservative. So, at the end of the day, I think this is a good assessment of, kind of understanding what your average annual return on investment would be, assuming a 15-year hold. But that's just one quick example of a property. Again, list price here on this property, $274,990. The same idea here, 30% down. This is also in our Houston market. The Houston market definitely has a good pool of property that is newer that is getting rented. I helped a client buy in Willis a couple weeks ago. I think it's about 2 weeks ago, and they already have an approved applicant. So that's really reassuring, because I think the biggest concern right now is, particularly with new construction, is finding areas and markets that are going to rent quick. Having a new property with all the bells and whistles, with all the warranties, is great, but it doesn't really do the job if you can't fill the the vacancy. So that's really kind of a key component to this as well. But you'll see as we go through those numbers, $2,350 in rent, mortgage $1,216, taxes $386, insurance $125, management fee $194, HOA $66. You'll see with our monthly expenses there, just under $2,000, $1,988, leaves you with a monthly income of $361.40. Again, if you back out your maintenance and vacancy and your leasing fees, you do have a slight negative there. But again, those are all estimates. Those aren't actual line items that are going to be deducted from your ACH payment. Those are just estimate factors for the year. So again, I think getting that number as close to zero or a positive is outstanding. But if all things are going as planned, you will see that monthly income highlighted number there, that 360, assuming all of the variables above. Okay, now I have those were two new construction properties. I've just wanted to, make everybody aware that we do offer pre-owned properties as well. So properties that are on the MLS that you find on Zillow or Redfin, etc., we can help you buy those as well. You may not have the same opportunities in the sense of incentives or interest rate buydowns, but we can help. So this property is built in 2007, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet, and this is in our San Antonio market. This property is $209,000, 30% down payment. We have typically an initial repair cost factor in here. So if it's not new construction, we definitely make the assumption that there's going to be a few dollars spent in getting the property rent ready, whether that's, light cleaning, paint, etc. So that's an estimated figure there. And then, of course, closing costs. So for this property here, we estimate rent at $1,695, mortgage payment $924, taxes $341, insurance $100, management fee $137, HOA $37, and you see our monthly expenses at $1,541, which leaves you a total cash flow of $153.66 per month. And of course, if you back out your maintenance and vacancy, I did not adjust these at all. This is default from the calculator, so it shows a little bit of a larger negative. But again, that is a estimate and kind of a buffer for future expectations, not necessarily actually what's going to be delivered to you. But you'll see here, over time, there's a bit of a lower return on investment on properties like this because of that maintenance and vacancy, right? Whereas before, you'll see there are much higher return on investments buying in those higher property classes. So just food for thought there. This is a single or a townhome, rather, in Clarksville, Tennessee. This property is actually rented, which is great. So we actually have some new construction that already has tenants in place. So for those of you that are a little concerned about maybe buying a property and having it sit vacant, even though, our property management can assure various things and kind of support comps and et cetera, some people are more comfortable with just buying something that already is functioning and operating and performing. We're happy to do that as well. This is an example of a townhome in Clarksville, Tennessee for $225 down payment. I even upped the down payment on this to 40% just to get as close as I can to that 100,000 figure. It really improves the number, but again, you don't need to go this high in down payment. It could be much less. So in investment capital needed, $96,959. Because these are a little bit smaller and it's a different market, rents are a little bit lower, $1,395, so about $1,400. And you'll see there's an interest rate buy down here. So this is a perfect example of what I'm talking about. We are working with a builder in Clarksville that is buying down the interest rates to 4.5%. That's for investors, right? So we have a really attractive opportunity with our preferred lender who's able to secure these rates with the builder. This is all done prior to any contracts, where the builder is essentially buying a tranche of capital and making sure that our investors can get this rate. There are some points that are associated or that are due from the borrower. So and that's dependent on your credit and down payment, et cetera. But ultimately, these are very achievable rates, right? This is kind of the format of how we present a lot of the new construction, particularly with the builders that we have a relationship with, whether we're the listing agent or a long-standing relationship with. So you'll see this interest rate is definitely much better than what you've seen. Taxes, your insurance, you'll notice taxes here in Clarksville are much lower than in Texas. You'll see we have our insurance, management fee, HOA. This property renting for $1,395 and having total expenses at $1,129 leaves you monthly cash flow of $265. And then backing out maintenance and vacancy, you have a slight positive there as well, which again, that's, not to say that's the number. The number you would most likely see is that 265 figure, assuming it's rented and no maintenance or vacancy that month. So that's a little bit of the property breakdowns. Again, these are just some quick examples on our website. It doesn't have to be new construction. It doesn't have to necessarily be a single family. It doesn't have to be 100,000, right? This was just a way of an example to show folks as, what kind of offerings or opportunities do I have with 100,000? We can definitely help, whether it's bigger purchases, smaller purchases, new, old. This is just a way to kind of get folks familiar with what our offerings are. Okay, really quick, for those of you that are thinking, great, I love the idea of buying a property, but how am I going to, it's too far from me. How am I going to go see it? I won't be able to work on it, right? Well, rest assured, we've thought through that. And that's why we have property management services in all of the markets that we do brokerage sales, right? So our goal here is to provide a service that allows you folks to scale, do the job that you do at home to earn your money, and we can do a good job of property management and making sure that the tenants are in place, that the property is well taken care of, that we're doing all of the proper due diligence before and during the tenancy. Essentially, we try to make it as straightforward as possible, very much landlord friendly. We have our cost here, ranges anywhere from 9% to, most folks are probably in the 7% range with their units. Those that have larger building counts, the 16 to 30 units, can get into that lower 6 and 5% rate. I like to explain that we're not the cheapest, but we're also not the most expensive. We're just middle of the road, and we definitely strive to do a very good job and to create an opportunity that would give you the confidence to continue purchasing and scaling up, and hopefully with us, right? That's the idea with property management. But again, these are just kind of some high levels of our services there, but rest assured we do have that set up for folks considering an investment purchase. Okay, Now transitioning into private lending. This is, again, this is a sector of our business that is very interesting, very different, very unique to Marshall Reddick. My background prior to joining Marshall Reddick is I was a residential conventional lender. And I found that the private lending sector of our business was extremely interesting and definitely a huge differentiator. So just to start at the top, who uses private money and why? Why would anybody take on a 9 or 12% interest rate, right? Well, the reality is it's because they don't have many other options, and it's not because they don't qualify. It's not that we're only seeking people with people with low credit or can't qualify because they don't have jobs. It's more of the type of loan that they're seeking is much harder to get from a traditional or conventional lender. So the typical borrowers that we are dealing with are going to be your real estate investors, some brokerages or property managers, right? If, like, for example, I've had actual agents call that have deals that are kind of maybe had a, a curveball with their financing that may call us for help, for like quick help. Most of the folks that you're finding, though, are going to be house flippers, right? Small builders or developers. We've definitely dealt with a lot of those in the past, particularly in our Texas and Tennessee markets. Again, those that have self-directed retirement accounts. I'm a perfect example of that. I have a solo 401k. I used Marshall Reddick private financing to purchase a duplex in my retirement account, in my solo 401k. You need a specific non-recourse loan, and that's what we offer, which is my next point there, right? So non-recourse and kind of specific niche borrowers. So those are all examples of people that borrow from us. Like, and I want to paint that picture. So because the whole purpose of this presentation is for you to understand that you can be the lender in these types of scenarios for these types of people. So I'm identifying at this point who those borrowers are and why they borrow from us is, again, it's we have speed, the flexible terms of our programs. We use common sense underwriting, whereas I'm sure those of you that are familiar with a conventional loan, they ask quite a few questions. They want to know, your very first job you've ever had, right? And sometimes you just don't have that pay stub. And I'm being silly there, but they definitely go quite deep into the request, and sometimes it gets to the point where it may not work for a conventional loan, and we feel much more confident in it instead of focusing on you as the borrower and your income and your credit and what you do for work and what is this movement on your pay stub or bank statement. We think of it more as, well, how much skin are you putting in the game? How much is the property worth? How much are you putting down? What could it rent for? We're looking at more property performance than borrower performance. So we feel pretty good. Ultimately it comes down to down payment. The larger the down payment from the borrower, and assuming we like the area, the more comfortable we are with the loan. But ultimately, speed, flexibility, and the collateral are kind of our main hallmark metrics that we focus on in the private lending world. Now, that gives a good indication of like what borrowers look like, who borrows from us, right? And now I wanted to touch a little bit on our mortgage fund. This would be a big part of the business that I focus on. I'm personally involved in. I have family involved in it. And ultimately, this is something that I spend a ton of time in. So what is the Marshall Reddick Mortgage Fund? So it's a pooled investment capital. It's exclusively a debt fund. So our fund is now up to about 80 million. And we exclusively lend capital. We don't own any real estate in it. We just hold the first position liens on multiple properties within that fund, right? So we basically focus on non-owner occupied investment properties. And the way that the fund generates revenue is through interest payments from those various borrowers, as well as points that we collect from the borrowers. Now, this is about as passive as an investment as you can get with Marshall Reddick. Property does require a bit more attention. There's property, even with a property manager, there's going to be questions, there's going to be involvement, there's going to be decisions to be made. In the mortgage fund, extremely passive. You are basically giving quarterly updates, quarterly distributions with and we follow it up with a quarterly webinar. There is no ask from you. There is just sending you your capital, your statements. Of course, if you have questions, we're always there, but this is as passive as it gets. Again, it's collateral backed. We're only focusing on first lien position, and it's basically non-owner occupied 1 to 4 units. I would say 90th percentile is going to be single family homes. So we're very comfortable with that asset, given that that's kind of what our whole brokerage is built on. So we feel as if that we have to ever take possession of a property or just have to deal with that disposition, we know the processes and how to handle that. This is definitely designed to produce reoccurring income and consistently. I'm going to go over some of the performance next, but for those of you that are trying to bank on some kind of consistent income, this is the way I would go. This is something that I would look closely at. And again, professionally managed. All of our loans are underwritten internally. We have an expert team that's been in the business for, over 15 years and has been a very, very promising and consistent path for a lot of our investors. The only, I have an asterisk here, the only limiting factor to the mortgage fund is you have to be an accredited investor. Just really quickly, there is 2 ways to be considered accredited. It's through income or net worth. Those of you that are wondering if you're accredited, if your income as a single tax filer is $200,000 or more for the last 2 years, or if you file jointly, that number is $300,000 or more for the last 2 years, you would be considered accredited via income. If you don't meet that threshold, you can also be considered accredited via net worth. That is $1 million net worth. Again, not just it factors in all of your assets minus your liabilities. So if you own property, the value minus the loan amount is the net equity there. But it does exclude your primary residence. That is something to just keep in mind. So again, any questions on that or how to figure out if you're accredited, we can go into more details on that on a one-on-one, but I just wanted to touch base as to what is the mortgage fund. And again, this is all of these loans are from the examples of the borrowers that I touched on earlier in the presentation. Okay, so what you see here is our performance since inception. Again, all of this information is on our website for you to view. You can find our mortgage fund details on our website under the Invest tab, Mortgage Fund. You can see every distribution from inception in 2020. I put that in a nice slide here for you guys to see, but essentially for only over 25 straight quarters, we have an average return of over 2%, 2.05. Our target, our strategy building or creating this fund, we have our fund director, Pat Prunty, who's been an amazing leader through this, but his overall strategy was to deliver consistent 2% returns or greater through the life of the fund. The fund runs in perpetuity. We have done a very good job of staying right there or above that figure for the last 25 straight quarters, right? So I think ultimately this is you'll kind of see the fund growth from 150,000 to just over 80 million. We're over 300, almost 50 investors and, almost 300 loans, active loans. We've obviously done a lot of loans throughout. But ultimately, the purpose of this slide is to show the consistency. It's to show that quarter over quarter, there has been that consistent return. Folks ask me all the time, in 2020, when rates were super low, to get 8% per year was pretty impressive. And, conventional rates have jumped up quite a bit. And a lot of times people ask, well, are your rates going to go up? Like, is my return going to go up? The answer to that is they don't move in unison. The direct lending or the hard money market operates completely different than conventional lending interest rates. We feel as though that our rates are competitive, and while we can charge more and we can probably at times increase rates or increase points, a big part of the performance of the fund is getting the money, keeping all of the money working and collecting those loan fees. Believe it or not, those loan fees are a big part of the yield that you all receive. And being part of the fund, you share in the interest and you share in the loan fees. So that is a big part of how the fund is generating a high enough yield to deliver this 8% plus per year return. So with that said, we have our fees at a place where we feel very confident, where we can have a consistent stream of revenue or a consistent stream of borrowers, but also, yield enough, generate enough return to deliver what we've set out to, like I said, which is that 8% plus per year at that starting tier. I say that starting tier because you could potentially get 8.5% to 9% depending on the capital amount. There's a profit share component of the mortgage fund that increases as you increase your capital. Not to go into the ultra specifics of that, but I would say for those of you considering this, it's safe to say about 8 to 9% is probably the expectation of the mortgage fund based on our history. This is a cool slide, and there's actually a calculator like this on our website that you can look at. It's kind of a projection. So given that we're talking about our 100,000, kind of staying with our $100,000 theme, I started with an initial investment of 100,000, 2% quarterly returns, which is basically what we've been doing since inception. And ultimately, you'll see kind of the various years that, or the various returns at those various years, right? So, at 5 years, you're at 148,595. That's putting no additional dollars. That's simply reinvesting your quarterly distributions. Again, you have the option to take those quarterly distributions and reinvest them, or you have the option to take the distribution and put it in your pocket, right? So for example, I like to reinvest that and get a compound interest. I have a ton of clients though that take that quarterly distribution and use it, right? They live off of it, or they use it for whatever other things they're interested in. But you have that option. You can change that option at any time. But this is making the assumption that you're reinvesting, but you're adding no new dollars. You're not putting a new 100,000 every 3 years or 5 years, right? So it's pretty amazing to see that, in 10, in 15, and 20 years, what that dollar amount could be. So I'll leave you guys here for a second to review this, and I'm going to go to the next slide in just a second. Okay. Now, next is we're going to cover direct loans. So the mortgage fund, again, pooled investment, up to 300 plus different capital partners. So your money is not tied to one specific loan. The benefit to that, it's more, you're spreading out your risk. If a loan in the mortgage fund has a problem, you wouldn't even be made aware of it. That is something that's handled internally. And again, distributions are just set out based on the quarterly performance of the fund. Now, there's folks that prefer to choose their specific loans. So you as an investor could say, okay, I have $100,000 and I want to go after one of these different loans. Here's a kind of a list, and this is on our website. You can go to invest in mortgages and you can see the various loans that are available. I've, of course, and like I said, in the theme of tonight's presentation with 100,000, I have highlighted the loans that are either in underwriting or in some kind of processing stage that could be invested in. These are not active, available right now. The Mortgage marketplace is what I call this when you're looking for direct loans, is constantly moving. So it's a bit more of an active role. And we're going to kind of go over the pros and cons of mortgage fund versus direct lending. But what you'll see here is you can filter. And again, I have $100,000 and you can see these various loans. Now, one of the big benefits to direct lending is you can pick a specific loan. So you can pick a loan that has a higher yield than 8%. We have loans that go up to 12%, right? In 12 months. And that sounds great, right? You can click on where it says full details, and you can see an expanded view of where the property is located, the scope of work, the rental comps, the purchase comps, all the escrow title work, the budget, all of the things that we use to underwrite. It's total transparency. So you have a really good insight as to picking a specific deal. Now, one of the downsides is you do have to fund the entire loan. You can't partially fund this. We don't commingle or fractionalize any of the lending. So if you see something for $85,000, that first one in Toledo, Ohio, you would require to invest $85,000. Now, here's the kind of the truth behind this is ultimately, yes, $85,000 at 11.4% yield, that is more than 8%. But a 12-month loan, the borrowers are only required, and they're only required to hold the loan for 3 months. So that means after 3 months, in month 4 or 5, or let's call it 6 months, they can pay off that loan, and it's great. You've got your principal back, you've got 3, 4, 5, 6 months of interest, but now you have all that money back, and now you have to go find a new loan. And while that sounds pretty simple, sometimes the process of redeploying capital constantly is a bit of a drag for people. And the downtime in between loans, when you look at how much downtime that 100,000 may have in a year, a lot of times the fund outperforms that. So unless you really want to take an active role into this kind of world, the fund usually outperforms direct lenders. But I know that there are probably direct lenders on this call that are listening to me right now that are saying, I can outperform that, and I do outperform that, and I'm sure that you do. But I'm speaking for a lot of people that are kind of taking a more passive approach. But those that are not, that want to take a little bit more of an active or take a little more ownership in this process, we want to make sure that this opportunity is made available. So again, you can see this on our website. I'm happy to point you in the right direction, but you can review all the loan terms and details. Select the loan, get more information on a loan. You'll have one of our loan analysts give you a call and discuss further. But ultimately, this is just a snapshot of what that looks like. I wanted to kind of just quickly compare direct lending versus mortgage fund. Again, here's kind of like some key elements. Your investor role. So the direct lending, again, is more active. You get to pick the loan. You get to pick the deal, and you're a lot more committed to that specific performance of that one borrower and that one project. Whereas the mortgage fund is more passive. You ultimately are it's a quarterly distribution kind of component. We are dealing with all of the decision making regarding the loans that we fund and originate, and you're just given quarterly statements to follow how the performance has been. Again, in the income and return profile, so direct lending, you can yield, higher, potentially 8 to 12%. It's paid monthly, and there's just a little bit more risk associated with that, but there's obviously a bit more return. With the mortgage fund, you're looking at more closer to 8 to 9%. It's definitely within that window. You're paid quarterly, and it's professionally managed, so much more hands-off. Again, this kind of leads to effort required. Direct lending, more active. Mortgage fund, more passive. And then how do you earn money, right, in these various options? So this is a great section to cover, because in the direct lending, you are exclusively earning the interest being charged. So if the borrower is paying 10%, you earn 10%. If they're paying 9, 12, whatever, we collect the origination fee. That's how Marshall Reddick makes money in the direct lending space. We collect that upfront origination fee. You collect the interest that's paid, whether that's for only the 3 months that's guaranteed, or for the whole term of the loan, which is usually 12 months, right? That's how that would work. Whereas in the mortgage fund, we share everything. So the points, the interest, everything goes into the pot. And then there is a preferred return that's paid to our capital partners at 6%. Then there's a various profit share, 50, 60, or 70%, depending on how much capital you have. But all of the examples that I've given you, that 2.05% return or that 8% annual, right, which is just annualized, that is assuming the lowest profit tier, just so you know. So of course, if I were to give examples of the 70, you're looking more at that 90 or that 9% per year. So anyways, that's a little bit more about the mortgage fund, is you share in both the points as well as the monthly interest. So now, again, we're coming to the end of our time here. So again, I want to thank everyone for spending time here and joining me tonight. For those of you that are interested in more articles, videos, webinars, you can find it. It's all free on our website under our Learn tab. And you can go to Education and watch previous webinars. This will be recorded. It will be sent out to you guys. If there was any questions that I missed, I will be doing follow-up calls through the rest of this week and early next week, just in case, to make contact, to learn kind of what brought you to tonight's presentation, and to see if there's anything that I can do or guide you into a direction to help in whatever it is you may be interested in. And go from there. So again, here's my information. Feel free to take a photo, screenshot. Again, I will be sending a follow-up email tomorrow with this presentation. You're going to have all my contact info as well. Want to thank you guys very, very much for attending. Always a pleasure and an honor to be able to speak. So thank you all very much, and hope everybody has a great night.